Becky.
And hello, moms, dads, and caregivers.
Welcome back for episode 3 of Parenting Through Trauma.
We have another amazing guest today, Erin, the second of 4 moms who are sharing their stories.
Yep, so let's get right to it. Our guest, Melissa, is a dedicated mother to 4 children.
I always have known I've wanted to be a mom. Being a mom is like the most important thing to me. So I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do that in the best way possible. As a parent, I would describe myself as patient and loving.
Melissa is also a hard worker. She started working as a nurse at the age of 19, and she later earned a master's degree in nursing education.
Yep, and today she's still working part-time, but she's mostly dedicated to raising her children.
And she's got a bit more on her hands than many of us do.
She does. It goes back to her first marriage. She married young, and before long, she was expecting her first child.
So listeners, some of what you're about to hear is difficult. You may want to make sure that your children aren't nearby. During Melissa's pregnancy, it became clear that she had married a dangerous man.
Yes, one who was abusing her physically and sexually.
Melissa didn't leave immediately, but as her pregnancy progressed, she became extremely worried about the safety of her soon-to-be child.
She gave birth to her daughter, Ashley, and just 5 days later, she left her husband.
5 days.
5 days. Let's pause and let that settle for a second. So, a young mother and a baby out of the home just 5 days after birth.
Melissa found support from family and friends, and she also hired an attorney.
Yes, but after a full year of trying, the courts refused a restraining order. The father was granted visitation rights, and then he was allowed to spend time alone with Ashley.
Melissa kept a watchful eye over her daughter as best she could, but Melissa became ever more concerned as Ashley moved through her toddler and preschool years.
She really never wanted to go with her dad. She was really resistant to going. She was really tearful. And then when she came home, she just was like a different child. She had more like behaviors and she was more emotional.
Things would calm down until it was time to go see Dad again.
It was a complete roller coaster.
And it got worse.
It was hugely disruptive to her life and our day-to-day life. She had significant fears. She would struggle to do anything. Go to the store, she'd be worried if there was a truck outside or if she saw a man.
She'd be worried every time she saw a truck or a man.
Pretty hard to avoid seeing trucks or men, and she had other specific fears too.
And loud noises. I mean, there were just so many different things. And we were just kind of trying to just keep everything calm and safe and have her feel safe. When she was 5 years old, she was worried about like her stuffed animals being taken or the doors not being locked. And it was really hard.
At age 5, Ashley confirmed Melissa's dark fears.
She started verbalizing that she was also being abused by the father.
And again, let's take just a moment to let that settle. So, once Ashley could talk about what was happening, Melissa succeeded in getting a restraining order. Ashley was no longer required to spend time with her father.
Yes, but the effort to recover from the trauma was just getting started.
You know, Becky, our listeners might like a dose of optimism before we go further. There is some post-traumatic growth in this story.
Okay, so let's jump ahead a bit to present day, and then we'll come back and fill in the timeline. So Ashley's now in middle school.
As she's gotten older, it's become easier for her. She's not as fearful, and she's really doing really well in school at this point. She is just growing into this 13-year-old who is just so confident and lovely and has her own interests, and she's really into acting and music, and she's very artistic. You know, it just seems so far away from where we were. It makes me and my husband realize that we have given her the support and encouragement to like be her own person and to have confidence in herself and realize that like she is important. She is talented.
Wow, that's so nice to hear.
Right? But there are some concerns.
She still today struggles with a lot of anxiety, but the amount of anxiety that she has is so far decreased than when she was little that it doesn't even seem comparable. She has some really good friends now that she loves to be with, but she does struggle in social situations and often becomes a bit anxious. She kind of struggles with lower confidence or being unsure of herself. And to see her love artwork and just be proud of herself is just so rewarding because I realize that she's okay.
You know, even though Melissa is describing some concerns, they sound typical for adolescents.
True, but let's be clear. We're not saying that everything is back to normal. Ashley will forever be shaped by what's happened to her. But I agree, Melissa's statements illustrate the promise of post-traumatic growth.
And we should add, the family has grown. When Ashley was 2 years old, Melissa met the man that she describes as her incredibly supportive husband. He's also the father of her 3 younger children.
A busy and vibrant family, so a lot of good things have happened.
But it wasn't an easy path, and we'll get to that next.
Okay, listeners, so now we can back up in time to right after Ashley was first able to talk about the abuse.
It was a whirlwind of activity from that disclosure. Interviews for her and assessments and doctor's visits, being started with a new therapist. And it was such a complicated time for our life as well, because when all this came about, I was actually 38 weeks pregnant. We were like going through all of the motions and all the appointments.
Yeah, that's a whole lot.
It is, and it was very challenging.
You know, motherhood and parenting is like hard on a day-to-day basis when everything is perfect. And when you are experiencing a significant trauma and your child is experiencing a huge significant trauma, it's so hard because there's just so many things that happen and happen quickly. You know, we had never been through anything like this before.
And of course, there's more.
She struggled in school, and really she was really only comfortable around very few people.
The discomfort around other people persisted for years.
You know, just this past summer was the first time that she ever had a sleepover because she's really just has a hard time being fully comfortable.
Some of Ashley's specific fears also lasted for a very long time.
We have family that still live in a general area of where her biological dad lives. And even traveling down that way increases her anxiety.
So Melissa and her husband did their best to comfort Ashley.
I think just filling our house with so much love has been so important. We realized that she just needed to be surrounded by so much love because she just was so worried and afraid that she was doing things wrong or everything was her fault. And so we just need to be constantly reinforcing her with love. We learned how to work through it and what was comforting to her. So having more sleep, more rest, more downtime, more books, more snuggles.
What's jumping out at you in this story so far, Becky?
I was thinking about some of the similarities between this story and Tracy's story from the last episode.
Yep, such as?
The trauma shook Ashley at the foundations of her mental health.
As you said last time, like an earthquake shakes a house right at its foundations.
Right, and it did so by making Ashley feel unsafe and in need, more than anything else, of love and reassurance.
Yes, I agree.
So, Erin, I think maybe it's time to talk about talking.
Of course, we're therapists, so we love to talk about talking.
And talking things through is an important part of healing.
Absolutely. But talking about complicated or frightening thoughts and emotions can be really hard, especially for little kids.
When you're 5 and 6, it's hard to navigate emotions or explain how you might feel. A lot of that came out in behavior. We were told from different providers how important it was for us to believe her and to feel that she could tell us anything. And so we just really focused on being there.
As a parent, it can be so helpful to just be there with an open ear. And eventually, Ashley started to talk more.
We have always been available for her to come to and talk to, and she has at different times. As she's gotten older, it's been easier to have more conversations and understand how she feels.
And Ashley got some help talking through what she was thinking and feeling.
We have been so lucky to be just connected with an incredible therapist.
What are you thinking, Erin?
I like the way Melissa waited for Ashley to come to her, ready to talk. Some parents feel an urge to really get in there with their kids and talk.
Right, but too much pressure and kids will just shut down.
So it's so important to be patient, to just be there for that moment when the child is ready to talk.
Melissa also says that Ashley had an incredible therapist.
And that was fortunate, since it can be hard to find a good fit.
So, Erin, there were others besides a therapist that Melissa and her family turned to for help, especially at school.
We have worked closely with all of her teachers, especially when she was younger. We transitioned her to more of an alternative school when she was in 3rd or 4th grade.
Melissa and her husband also leaned on friends, neighbors, and extended family.
Support was huge. Just having someone take our older child for a walk or to their house or come over and read books.
So, as our listeners know, neighboring parents often help each other out. A little babysitting, a little carpooling, playdates, activities, that kind of thing. And someone in Melissa's situation could certainly use a little extra of this type of help. At the same time, there's only so much your neighbors can do, because few people have experience with this kind of trauma.
No one really knew what to say or how to support us.
Also, Melissa protected Ashley's privacy by only sharing the details of what had happened with a tight circle. So, Erin, I know you well enough to see that there's something on your mind.
I was just thinking that we've been focused on Ashley. What about Melissa? What about what she was experiencing as a mother? It sounds like maybe she didn't have many people that she could talk to.
She had a few, and she did go to therapy.
I think that just having people that you can talk to or that you can share, who you really are as a person.
But she sees now, in retrospect, that she and her husband needed more.
Maybe we should have been more involved in more support groups, or maybe we should have reached out and found a bigger community that had actually experienced what we had gone through.
Melissa was dealing with some heavy thoughts and emotions.
For me, I'd say worry and just anger, and regret, I guess, for me, and sadness, I think, for both of us. And for so long, I was worried every moment of every day. Would she be okay? Although she has done so well, and although it was really hard, it's just so sad that it has impacted her childhood and will forever impact her life, regardless of how well she's doing on a day-to-day basis.
Melissa's worries were deep and constant, and she learned a lot as a nurse, maybe too much, about the possible long-term effects of a trauma like Ashley's.
how's this going to impact her childhood? How's it going to impact her as a teenager? How's it going to impact her as an adult? How does it impact our family? How does it, like, everything? My mind just would wander to all these different things. I worry a lot for her, just because what she's been through. I worry, like, how that could impact her relationships. Like, I want her to find, like, that self-worth and value in herself, and to attract people that like her for who she is and not have her mold herself for other people.
Melissa realized that she had to take one step at a time.
I think that when you're just starting this journey, it just is all-consuming. And it's so easy to think about absolutely everything. And I think it's so important to just, like, live moment to moment through it, rather than letting your mind wander to all possible things.
And as our listeners might guess, Melissa had some difficult thoughts and feelings about her own role in what happened.
There's some level of embarrassment and shame that comes along with this journey.
What do you think, Erin?
I'm thinking that mother and daughter both went through a challenging trauma. And I'm noticing just how heavily Melissa has carried a burden of responsibility for the trauma itself and for her daughter's recovery.
And thus the deep worries and the complicated thoughts and emotions.
Right. And when the burden you carry is too heavy, when you're too hard on yourself, it's very difficult to show up as a parent in the way your kid needs.
Listeners, it's so important to go easy on yourself. And yes, over time, Melissa did ease up on herself.
I have really had to learn to give myself a lot of grace and realize that it's not my fault. I feel for so many years I was really hard on myself. And as I've gotten further away, that, like, it's really important to just be kind to myself too.
She also gained a more optimistic outlook.
And realizing that, like, we're going to be okay. Maybe it's not exactly the way that I would have planned it. So as the years have passed, it has become easier. I think that that is so important to realize, that what your life is right now is not what your life is going to be.
And here's an important piece of what she's learned along the way.
As, like, your child's biggest support system, it's just so important to make sure that you're giving yourself some level of self-care, whether that's, like, walking. For me right now, it's gardening.
Your child's biggest support system.
Making sure that you're taking care of your whole self, so then you can care for their whole self.
Today, Melissa has reached a place of greater acceptance.
And I think that meeting our child and children where they are and who they are, instead of, like, this idea of what you have of, like, who your child might be.
Yes, that's so important. You can't control everything in life. Sometimes trauma happens. It's humbling, and it can force you to let go of the life you imagined.
Allowing us and them to just be who they are, and us to be who we are in our home, and just meeting that with love has really helped.
Melissa now seems to be focused on what is, not what might have been, and that's an important illustration of healthy post-traumatic growth.
You know, it's pretty clear that all of this is still difficult for Melissa to talk about.
Yeah, and it may continue to be difficult. Recovery is a really long process. And for most, it's not something that you're ever truly finished with. You keep at it. There's always room for more post-traumatic growth.
Thanks, Erin.
Listeners, we'll be back again shortly with another great episode.
And another great mom.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Dartmouth Trauma Interventions Research Center, hosted by Erin Barnett and Becky Parton. Special thanks to all of our guests. Editing by Kay Jankowski, Erin Barnett, and Becky Parton. Script development, audio production, and music composition by Chris Trimble and Treehouse Audio Productions. Please see the show notes for more information.